Chapter 10 ends with Jesus taking the disciples out of the city of Jerusalem and headed east about 20 miles to the Jordan River. As you know, John's gospel was written last. The others were already in circulation. John knew what was in them. He wrote his gospel to fill in the blanks the others left out. And John is really concerned with the last week of Jesus' life, a little more than last week. So the first half of the gospel is him telling stories about things that Jesus had done, the others left out, but then really he wants to get to that last week. So really the whole last half of his gospel focuses on about 9 days, maybe 10 days. As chapter 10 ends, the religious authorities in Jerusalem have now officially rejected Jesus. They are settled into rejection. They're not going to change. They become the guys that end up putting him to death. They're already plotting how to get rid of him. At one point, they've taken up stones to stone him, and he's barely able to restrain them. And so Jesus, to cool their anger and to forestall any attempts that they want to make on executing him, because it's not his time yet, he leaves the city of Jerusalem. Heads out to the Jordan where John the Baptist had been baptizing 3 years before. It's a little resort area. It's very nice. There are lots of water. There's palm trees. Because they're headed into that last week and all the trouble that it's going to bring to the disciples. And Jesus just wants to spend some time with the boys, preparing them for what's coming. So while they're there by the Jordan River, a messenger comes. The messenger is coming from a family that are friends of Jesus and the disciples. They live in a little village called Bethany, which is just 2 miles east of Jerusalem, just over the top of the Mount of Olives. And that is where Jesus stayed when he would come from the north, from Galilee, down to Jerusalem to visit for the feasts. He didn't stay in the city. He stayed in Bethany, in the home of Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. We see some stories of them there in the house. You guys remember the story of Martha making dinner and upset because her sister's not helping her? That's all takes place in their home. This messenger comes to the disciples that Lazarus, the brother, has gotten ill, and the sisters have sent a message pleading with Jesus to come and heal him. They've seen Jesus heal many times, and they know that he can heal. There's no doubt in their minds, and so they do what they know Jesus is able to do. They send a message, please come. Your friend, our brother, he's ill. Look at verse 1 of chapter 11. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick, which is a story we read about in the next chapter. And we'll look at it next week because it's one of my all-time favorite stories in the Bible. Verse 3, therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, as we'll see, Lazarus is going to die, but death is not the end of a story. The power of Christ and the glory of God are. And then we read these confusing and troubling words. Verse 5, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he had heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Wait, what? That's not what we would write. After saying he loved them, we would expect to read, and so he got up and ran to Bethany as quick as he could. Because we assume that the best thing that Jesus could do, the loving thing to do, was to take away Lazarus' pain and the distress of the sisters as soon as possible. But apparently their and our best wasn't. Jesus saw something better. And his love was committed to that. Friends, in all that follows, please keep verse 5 in mind. Jesus loved these 3. He loved them. All that he does that follows is based in that love. And the love that he had for them, he has for you. Everything that God does in your life comes because he loves you. Verse 7. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." And the disciples said to him, "Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." Jesus is simply drawing on an idiom that was current at that time. We have it come down to us as this: you work while the sun is shining. Make hay while the sun is shining. It's the same idea. Hey, now's the time to do the work because the night's coming when no one can work. Verse 11, these things he said, and after he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him." Then his disciples said, "Oh, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well." However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about the rest in sleep. These poor guys are so confused. They had left Jerusalem because of the hostility of Jesus' enemies, and they're surprised that he wants to go back there now. Remember that Bethany, the village that they're talking about going to, is just a couple miles east of Jerusalem. It's actually about a mile and a half. It's a suburb of Jerusalem, and for sure, if Jesus shows up there, the authorities are going to hear about it, and they're going to come out, and they're thinking, the disciples are thinking they're going to come, they're going to arrest him. But Jesus reminds them he has a mission to perform. He's there to do the Father's will, and right now the Father's will lies in a village called Bethany, and it's time to go. Well, he tries to tell them what's up, but as usual, they don't get it. Lazarus is dead. But Jesus refers to it as sleep because it's only temporary. Now, they assume that he's referring to regular sleep, and their thinking is, oh, he's been sick. If he's resting, if he's sleeping, it means he's mending. He's getting better. Verse 14, then Jesus said to them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him." Which they also misunderstand. Verse 16, then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Thomas thinks Jesus is depressed. And that he's saying, let's go back to Jerusalem and end it. And you can kind of understand why Thomas would think this way. Jesus has now come to this point where he's presented himself as Messiah, and what has been the response of the leadership of Israel? We hate you, we want to kill you. And everybody knows that. That's why they've been at the Jordan, to get away from that. And now he's going back. He's walking into the teeth, of the lion. He's depressed. Oh, and what put him over the top was when he got news that his good friend Lazarus was dead. Jesus is depressed. Let's get it over with. And Thomas, good disciple. Wherever the rabbi is, there is the disciple, right? Because disciples want to be just like the rabbi. And so Jesus is going, guys, let's go with him. He's going to go end it. We need to be with him. Let's go. Friends, that's not at all what's going on. Jesus is about to blow their minds. It's just that the stage had to be properly set for that mind-blowing to take place. He's about to prove that he has power over death. And the only way to do that was to let Lazarus die. In order for Jesus to really prove he had power over death, he had to wait for 4 days before going. He needed to arrive at Bethany at a specific time, 4 days after Lazarus had died. Now, I'll share why he had to wait 4 days in just a moment. Before that, I want to ask you to consider all of this from the perspective of the sisters, Mary and Martha. Think about it from their perspective. They send the message, and they expect Jesus to come as fast as he can. After all, Jesus loves Lazarus. And they know that he has healed a lot. He's healed strangers, complete strangers, people he doesn't know, he's never met before. He heals them. Certainly he's going to come and heal one of his best friends. But Jesus didn't come. The messenger that they had sent comes back, and they're like, where's Jesus? And I don't know. I gave him the message and he didn't come. Well, what, did he send a message back? No, he just said, thanks for coming, and sent me back to you. His sisters were mystified because none of that fit what they knew about Jesus. And friends, that's the point. What they knew about Jesus wasn't all there was. They were about to learn a whole lot more about him. And as they wait, Lazarus gets worse. He breathes his last. They wrap his body in a shroud, and they carry it and they put it in a cave in the village cemetery. And they roll a stone across the opening. And then they huddle in their grief. And they begin to talk with one another, pondering heaven's silence, trying to fill it with something that will make sense, but nothing does. They keep coming back to the same dilemma as they talk with each other. Where's Jesus? Why didn't he come? It would have been such a small thing for him to heal our brother. Jesus heals. Jesus heals strangers, and Jesus does amazing healings. He healed a guy who was lame for decades a while back, and just recently he healed a man who was born blind, and never in all of history have we heard of that kind of a thing. Jesus heals. He has power to heal. It would be so easy for him to come and have healed our brother. He fed thousands with a Happy Meal. How hard would it have been for him to come and to heal our brother? You know, those questions get repeated in all of our lives. It's just that the names have been changed. It's not Lazarus that died. It's our wife, our husband, a child, a parent, a friend. And it's not Mary and Martha that are sending the request for healing. It's our name. Lord, please heal my wife, heal my husband, heal my friend who's lying on a hospital bed with tubes. Lord, please heal. I think most of us in this room have been in that place at one time or another. Lord, heal. Why won't you come? Why won't you do this? It might not be the death of a loved one. It might be some other disappointment with God. The loss of a job. The blow up of a marriage. Being passed over for a promotion. It all comes because we start with a God who's too small. Since knowing and enjoying him is the point and the essence of life, God has to break out of the little box that we keep sticking him in. The silence of heaven is when we form the questions that reveal how short-sighted our ideas about God are. God lets us get it out. He lets us ask the questions so that he can come and show us that he's way more than we thought he was. Heaven's silence is when we realize that disappointment with God is an expectation set too low. Verse 17, so when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. John mentions that Jesus arrived on the 4th day after burial for a reason. Why 4 days? Why did he wait 2 days? Why? Because they had a belief, it wasn't true, but it was a belief that was widely held. We have beliefs that we hold that aren't true, right? Everybody does. And they had one. That when a person died, their spirit left their body but stayed in the area. And that it was possible within 3 days, if the person had lived a good enough life and enough grief was shown by the survivors, that God in his mercy would say, okay, and allow the spirit to go back in and the person could rise. Now you understand why people hired professional mourners to come to their funerals. To try to work up enough grief, enough tears, that God would say, oh, look, this person was so loved, let's allow them to rise. But it had to happen within 3 days. The belief was, on the 4th day, the spirit left and the person was irrevocably dead. You understand now why Jesus had to wait till the fourth day? Because if Lazarus had risen before that, people could have attributed it to, oh, well, it's because of all the sorrow and because Lazarus was a good guy. Jesus wanted to make sure that was completely off the table so that when Lazarus did rise, everybody would have to say, Jesus did that. He has power over death. And so he waited. Remember what Jesus had said earlier. Lazarus' illness was not going to end in death, but in the glory of God. Verse 20. Now Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, watch her words, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Word comes to Martha, Jesus and the disciples, they're making their way to the village. So she runs out to meet him. And her first words are words of rebuke. And then she tries to soften them by leaving the door open for whatever it is that Jesus might want to do. And when he tells her, her disappointment with him comes through yet again. Your brother will rise again. And what does she do? Yeah, the end of time. Mary and I were hoping for something a little sooner. It's really the implication of what she's saying. Verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher has come. He's calling for you. And as soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. Now, Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her, that is Mary, in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, oh, she's going to the tomb to weep there. Then, when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Do those words sound familiar? Exactly the same thing Martha had said. Why? Because they had been saying it to each other. Well, they're waiting for Jesus to come, and he's not coming, and they're asking the question, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And then Lazarus dies. If he had been here, he wouldn't have died. And they've said it to each other. They've rehearsed these words. Verse 33, therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in spirit and was, what? Troubled. That word groaned, it's an okay translation, should be, quite frankly, snorted. It's a sound of indignation. It's a sound that you give when you're really teed off, really ticked, really angry. It's this. Ugh! That's the sound he made. What's Jesus angry at? Mary? Is he angry at Mary? Is he angry at the mourners? No, I'll tell you what Jesus is angry at. Jesus is angry at sin and death. That's what he's angry at. Because as he stands there and sees this grief, he's seeing beyond this particular expression of grief to all of the billions of scenes of grief that have attended every loved one who's died. That's why he's there in Bethany, folks. This is what he's come for, to put an end to it. And that's why he let Lazarus die. Not just so that Mary and Martha would realize that he came to conquer death, but so that all of their friends would see it. And you and I would read it 2,000 years later and realize that even if this body dies, we don't die because Jesus Christ has risen from the dead and we believe in him. We have eternal life. That's why he came. He's standing there and he looks at this grief and he sees all of it. He sees every funeral you ever went to and the tears that you've shed and the tears that you will yet shed. And that's why he came, and that's why he was in Bethany. That's why he was there. That's why he waited 4 days. Because he loved them and because he loves you. Verse 34, and he said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. And that word does not refer... I think sometimes because of who we know Christ is, we get this idea that he kind of just sailed through life without really much emotion. Maybe he smiled every now and then. And then when he was disappointed in something, the disciples were arguing about who was greatest, he would and that was the full swing of his emotion. No. He snorts in indignation and anger at sin and death. And now he's sobbing. This isn't a single tear that runs down his cheek. The word describes bawling. This is sobbing so deep you can't catch your breath. This is getting lightheaded because you need to take a breath and you can't seem to pull in the breath because it just goes right back out in another sob. Isaiah 53 says that the Messiah is a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, immersed in grief. Hebrews 4 says that Jesus Christ knows what we feel. He has felt it himself. Verse 36, then the Jews said, see how he loved him? And some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? And the answer to that is, yes, of course he could, but he didn't. He didn't so that he could show that his power surpassed the power to heal. He has the power to give life to the dead. Verse 38, then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. Which, by the way, just as a sideline, he groans, he sobs, and he's back to groaning. If you've ever lost a loved one, you know how your emotions are a roller coaster. It's just, and sometimes within a second, you can be from sorrow to anger to feeling utterly numb and then right back into anger, and there's no charting where it's going to go. I think that we're seeing an amazing picture of the humanity of Christ here. Again, groaning within himself, he came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there's a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. It's after learning of Lazarus' rising that we're able to go back to earlier in the story and advise his sisters. I asked this first and second service. I want to ask it again here. Show of hands. How many of you have heard this story before? You know that Lazarus was going to... Raise your hand, please. Everybody that's heard this story before. Okay, hands down. How many of you have never heard this story before? This is the first time you're hearing it. Hands up. There you go. Look at this. People here that have never heard this story. When we started, did you know that Jesus was going to raise him from the dead? Think about that. See, we see the emotion of Jesus. He knew what he was going to do. He knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, but he's still caught up in the emotion of it all. Why? because it was all very real. And he was looking into history and looking into the future and the past and seeing all the emotion that would attend all the loss of all the loved ones and friends and family. We read the story knowing what he's going to do, and we go, oh yeah, this is a story where you raise a dead guy from the dead. Oh yeah. We're kind of the dispassionate ones. Really, the first time we read the story, we should be like, wait, what? He did what? But then we go back. It's now that we know the story, and as we read this, I wonder how many of you, as we were reading this, and Martha and Mary coming to Jesus going, Lord, if you had been here, our brother wouldn't have died. And we would want to walk up to Martha and Mary and go, honey, don't say that. He's going to raise your brother. Trust me, this is all going to be awesome. Don't say that. Just go to him and say, Lord, so glad you're here so you can raise my brother. Isn't that what we would be saying to Mary and Martha? That's the point of the story. That's the point. Jesus waited by the Jordan for a couple of days, not just so that a couple of sisters would realize that Jesus has power over death, not just so that their friends that had come to mourn would realize it, but that we would too. This story is every bit as potent for us as it is for them, because Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. You see, we read this and we want to coach those sisters to not lose faith, to hold on, because Jesus' delay wasn't what they thought it was. They read it as heaven's silence. It was, in fact, God's goodness preparing the stage for his glory, and their discovery that Jesus was even more than they thought he was. They saw Jesus only as healer. Now they know him as raiser. He gives life to the dead. Christian, do you ever feel like you've been overlooked by God? You're loyal, you're devoted, you believe in him, you know, like Martha, oh yes, one day I'll be in heaven. But right now it feels like God's turned his back on me. He hasn't turned his back on you. His gaze is on you. And his seeming delay and heaven's silence is in fact God working behind the scenes in a way that you do not see, to reveal himself to you in a way you do not know yet. When we are in distress, when it feels like God has overlooked us, we think the solution is, God, come now. Because a primary concern to us is our happiness. And we allow our happiness to be determined by our circumstance. And if our circumstance isn't producing happiness, Lord, come and fix my circumstance. God is not concerned about your happiness. He's concerned with your holiness. And holiness is based on what you know about God. And so his aim is to reveal himself to you. And sometimes that takes a time for him to set it up. Things have to be set up. You have to start asking the questions that make you realize maybe what I believe about God isn't the full story. Maybe there's more. Are you guys tracking with me? You see, this story, as we think about how Martha and Mary, after their brother was raised, wish they could go back and counsel themselves before. We need to do that going forward. Right now, I know if we were to do a poll, and this would be fun, we could ask, how many of you wish you could go back to your teen self and counsel yourself? Right? Go back to your 16-year-old self, have a chat. You still wouldn't listen to yourself. You know that. You still wouldn't listen to yourself. It'd be like, I turn into you? Forget that. True. Don't eat the whole enchilada. Don't. Don't wear those floral print pants to 9th grade. Don't do it. I know you think they're dope. They're not. You just look like a dope. Don't do it. Ninth grade, floral print pants. My senior year of high school, they're still writing in the yearbook, loved those pants. Don't go out with, fill in the name, right? That'd be fun. Everybody shout out the name. No, don't do that. We all have that one date or that one romance that we had. We're like, what was I thinking? I would like to be able to just go back to just a couple of days ago, Friday morning. In the shower, shaving, and wasn't quite awake yet. And as I was taking the razor from this side of my face to this side of my face, I went a little too close, and the razor went right across my nose. And you can come look at it later. There's two little lines, right? Can you see it right there? Two little lines right across my nose. It bled for 4 hours. And what made it worse is as soon as I did it, I had a wedding to do yesterday. So, yeah, exactly. Wouldn't you know? The first thought in my mind, oh, of course, I'm doing a wedding tomorrow. If we could only go back and counsel and coach ourselves in the past. That's the mentality that we need to have going forward. Because Jesus Christ has conquered sin and death, you will be in the glory of heaven. Let that self, that reality, that truth come and counsel you now to hold on, to trust the Lord. He's not turned his back on you. If he has guaranteed you heaven, is he going to withhold anything else from you? He's working. Trust him. I want to end with this Psalm 27. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Would you stand? It's been a while since we've done this. I used to end every service with this song. For those of you that know it, sing it out. His name is Jesus. Jesus, sad hearts weep no more. He has healed the broken-hearted, open wide the prison doors. He is able to deliver